I was reading this about a month or so ago on Nvidia. Essentially says using the whole system, Nvidia market cap would be just a mere $22 trillion. Jensen stood up and said, who is that man, right? And now he's saying that the big picture, from a big picture point of view, the tech sector has never looked better. So I'm going to bring in now John Talbot, sector specialist at UBS HOLT. First of all, the phone had to be ringing off the hook with this one, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. It was definitely a headline to say the least. But I think, Charles, bigger picture, what we're trying to do at HOLT is we're trying to understand the true economic returns of a business. And with Nvidia here, the economic returns the last few years have just been incredible. So the big question is, can they sustain the levels that they're at right now? That's a big question clients are asking.
So I'm familiar, we're all familiar with return on investment, but this CFROI is relatively new. So explain this, because it's an integral part of your system, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the CFROI framework has actually been around for many years.
Right.
The way I think of it is, it's a way to compare and contrast all companies around the world on a like-for-like basis. Just give you a very quick example. Think about Taiwan Semi versus Nvidia. One capitalizes R&D and looks at all the gross plant. One does not capitalize the R&D. We put all the metrics in the world on a similar basis, CFROI, and then we value the cash flows of the companies.
So let's look at this here. Then the AI era points to CFROI reaching an all-time high. And so we got the personal computer area, the networking area, the mobile area, the cloud area, and now we have this AI area. This lends credence to the notion that these stocks have more room to the upside.
Yeah, absolutely. So the long arc of time, and I think anybody who's ever bearish on tech has to look at this chart here. Over 50 years of data, we've seen the return on capital rise ever higher for tech. And I think, Charles, to your point now, we're at this AI cycle where returns on capital are around 17%. So the big question is, again, can it be sustained at those levels? And I think as you think about the long arc of history, it's very hard to bet against tech here.
But ironically, people were saying that here, right? Can this last? Will it last? Nah, maybe it won't. Okay, will it last? Nah, we think it's overdone. And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And it's the irony is people are more prone to bet against this long arc of history, to your point, than the momentum we've got. So let's talk about an area where really it's been stuck. The hyperscalers, will they get their money back? A lot of people are concerned there. You wrote specifically about this in a recent report.
Yeah, absolutely. So the big concern is that all this investment, what is the return on capital on this investment? So you are seeing the near-term returns on capital fall. I think what a lot of investors miss is that while returns on capital are falling, the growth is very high. You're generating more and more value creation and economic profit there on the right-hand side.
So this is what you're looking at here.
That's right.
This is what investors should be looking
at.
That's
right. The absolute dollar of economic profit.
And this suggests that these stocks are really undervalued here.
That's right. It suggests that the next few years, the trend remains very positive.
Okay.
I think the biggest wins are going to be in healthcare, and I think this is largely underreported.
You've said this for a long time.
I'm convinced of it, and here's why. As much as we think of ourselves as individuals, biologically we're very similar to each other, and computers can watch what happens, and now the algorithms are so good that when you go into a hospital, if we know roughly, you give us your permission about information, this is the hospital now, not Google. The hospital can say, hey, we think this is the next ailment that's going to happen. That's how good the algorithms are getting. The whole era of precision medicine, the ability to have medicine that's directed directly at you is directly related to these algorithms. Another example is diagnostics. Pathology and radiology are now better with computers than what the humans do. So what will happen is you'll still have your doctor, but the computer will make a recommendation. That recommendation will be more accurate than the doctor's eyes.
And that was the former CEO of Google, Eric Schmidt, with me on my documentary on AI back in 2019 on where AI is expanding the most. He zeroes in on healthcare. This week, we present AI, the intelligence revolution, with a fresh perspective. Technology giant Microsoft at the forefront of AI expansion and implementation, incorporating AI not just into the workplace, but our everyday lives as well. Joining me right now is the Vice Chairman and President at Microsoft, Brad Smith. Brad, great to see you. Thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for having me, Maria.
Tell us how Microsoft is using AI and how you are enabling business and individuals around AI.
Well, the interesting thing about AI is if there's a problem in the world, and obviously there's many, AI is probably part of the solution. Take healthcare. Let's take a very practical problem. There's almost 2,000 rural counties in America. 45% of them have 5 or fewer doctors. 198 of them have no doctor at all. we need AI to help doctors work better. So we have a Copilot AI assistant for doctors. I experienced it myself last year as a patient. I'm sitting in a doctor's office and the doctor said, I've got this new product from Microsoft. Would it be okay if I used it to help record what I'm saying to you, that I don't have to write up the notes afterwards? And I'm like, let's give it a try. It makes every doctor able to spend more time with patients and less time writing up notes. It enables doctors with our other Copilot technology to go research your ailment and find the best treatment. And if you're in a rural county where there's a shortage of doctors, this is a game changer. So it's that on steroids across the economy. I'll give you another example, wildfires. Last year, wildfires in this country destroyed almost 7 million acres, roughly the size of the state of Massachusetts. At Microsoft, we're working to put AI with cameras to be able to spot wildfires, identify that it's a fire out of control, and it enables the firefighters to send the right people to the fire faster to put it out before it spreads. That not only saves trees, it saves houses, it saves people's lives. That is why we do what we do.
That is incredible, and it's great examples there. But Brad, so many companies are spending so much money, and the numbers are mind-boggling. We had Meta's new president, Dina Powell-McCormick, on the other day, and she told us that Meta is spending $600 billion on AI and data centers and sort of this build-out. How much is Microsoft spending?
Well, we've said that this fiscal year, this 12-month period alone, we'll spend more than $140 billion. And we'll have earnings next week, and we'll update that. I think the main thing to know is we have more demand than supply. For the first time in my 32 years at this company, we cannot give everybody everything they want to buy. So we need to build out this expansion. It's good for our company, it's good for our customers, it's across the country. Frankly, it is a big part of what President Trump calls the reindustrialization of America. When you look at the economic impact of this, what we're contributing in terms of jobs, but more importantly, what we're contributing in terms of capabilities for every part of the economy, this is critical.
So how are you allocating that money in terms of the build-out? Is it largely for data centers, Brad? Is it for the power that is powering up this revolution? Talk to us about how the money gets allocated, and should investors feel like they'll see a return on investment sooner or later?
Well, look, if you have sales you can't make because you don't have capacity, then as soon as the capacity comes online, you actually start making more money. It's about as simple as that. The truth is, Maria, it's sort of all of the above based on what you're asking. We have to buy land. We have to go buy power. I think one of the most important things that we're doing as a company, and frankly, what the president has nudged the entire industry quite rightly to do, is pay our own way. That means we pay for the electricity generation that we need so that the neighbors and the taxpayers don't have to. We construct these giant buildings. It needs HVAC and cooling systems. It needs all of the electrical components. It needs the chips. It all adds up to these billions of dollars and jobs. Frankly, one of our biggest challenges is getting more skilled labor. You talked about that on this show earlier this week. We're going to need another 500,000 electricians in this country, and it may be in 2 years, it may be in 5 or 7, but the reality is you can't have more electricity without more electricians, and it means working with organized labor, with community colleges across the country to give people the skills so they can fill these jobs.
All right, KG, it looks like just a little bit of a pause, not major pushback on the records that we saw. You were here as we were setting records. Just walk us through how you're looking at markets now.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's price action was actually relatively good. If you did see, you saw some of the heavier weighted stocks in the S&P 500 in the green yesterday, consumer discretionary, also technology, communication services in some respects. We continue to see this really strong strength when it comes to semiconductors. And in fact, this morning, we may still see some green on the screen for the semiconductors at their SK Hynix reported earnings yesterday evening that did show strong growth here. Now, we are seeing a pullback this morning, Diane. I think that's really kind of on the back of what actually happened yesterday, about maybe an hour, hour and a half into the futures trading overnight. There were some fake news headlines around an attack from the U.S. in Iran that actually created a spike in crude oil up to around $97, $98. And we did see a drop of over 1% in the S&P 500 after about maybe 10 minutes or so, even less than that. It was reported that the initial headlines were false, and we did see a recovery overnight from not only just the equity futures, but also the energy market did kind of reverse from those highs of around $97 here. So I think that's also maybe putting a little bit of a dampening on the optimism this morning, just because of that, once again, erroneous news headline yesterday, putting everybody on edge when it comes to these talks over in Pakistan.
So it does show that the headline risk is still at play here, right? The overall markets, in terms of equities especially, maybe looking past or looking towards the off-ramp, but still there is some headline risk at play. Let's talk the earnings picture. We got Tesla's latest quarterly results. No surprise that EV sales are still, challenged, but the earnings were better than expected. Walk us through your takeaways overall.
Yeah, we saw revenue coming in at $22.39 billion. She was looking for $21.92 billion. So a beat in some respects, depending on the earnings estimate that you are utilizing here. But we did see adjusted earnings per share exceeding the street's expectations, coming in at 41 cents. Street was looking for 36 cents here. Now, gross margins came in at 21.1%. We have to be mindful that the EV tax credits are now, kind of rolling off here. So we are seeing a dampening in demand, especially in the United States and the North America market. So we did actually see those auto sales come up a little bit short. But this is actually a report that started off really strong. But when we started getting into the guidance, especially on the conference call, that's where we started seeing a pullback to the downside. They are expecting fiscal year CapEx guide to be around $25 billion. Now, that's coming from the CFO. If you're looking at the previous guidance, it was around $20 billion. So they increased their CapEx spend by around $5 billion. And they talked about a significant amount of initiatives, not only rolling out and trying to build out the production lines for Optimus to scale that business up, but also the RoboCab, as well as others product offerings, the Megapack 3, things of that nature. They also talked about scaling up their fabrication operations, if you will. So getting into the semiconductor space, not only to provide the chips in-house, but also maybe to look at sales outside of their business. And that's really the direction that they're trying to go. It's autonomous vehicles, it's robots, and it's artificial intelligence. And in order to do that, the company is going to spend money. And the market really is kind of focusing on that CapEx guidance and maybe still putting it in the light of an automaker rather than a technology company that's really trying to make some headway when it comes to robotics and the semiconductor space as a whole here. So a pullback this morning, not a dramatic one. We did see a pretty decent move off the lows over the last couple of weeks here. But that's just, once again, the result of the CapEx guide was really the reason for this pullback this morning.
So seeing a variety of analyst reaction to these results from Tesla, you got several lowering their price target. Mizuho's lowering theirs to 480 from 540, but they're keeping an outperform rating, which obviously, even with the 480, that's upside from here. You've got Needham, their hold on it. Canaccord Genuity, they have adjusted their price target up to 450. They've got a buy rating on this. Dan Ives, no surprise, got an email in my inbox from him saying the autonomous roadmap looks good. CapEx ramp, a good, not a bad thing. What's your take on some of the analyst reaction?
Yeah, I think it's going to be mixed. Here's where you are going to see a split. So the company is going to have, according to the CFO, negative free cash flow for the remainder of the year. So you never want to hear that as an investor. But obviously, they are trying to ramp up their own investments into maybe some of the future technologies. So some analysts are kind of looking maybe 5 years, 10 years out. while others are looking at the short term where you will have a Mag 7 name that will be negative free cash flow, that will see negative free cash flow for the remainder of the year. Obviously, that's a little bit of a split within this market here. So it just depends on the perspective of how you look at Tesla in the near term, maybe some headwinds, but over the long term, obviously they have been able to show really strong innovation and take market share. It seems like this is one of those cycles that they're trying to kind of ramp up here and try to play the long game rather than the short game. And that's why we're probably seeing the split in the analyst expectations.
All right, let's talk IBM. Those shares are under pressure off the back of its quarterly results. Walk us through the numbers.
Yep. So for IBM, we did see revenue coming in at $15.92 billion. That's a 9% increase on a year-over-year basis, and that did beat the street's expectations. Adjusted earnings per share came in at $1.91. Street was looking for $1.81, with gross margin sitting at around 56.2%. Now, we are seeing growth decelerate on a quarter-over-quarter basis. That's one of the areas or reasons why we are seeing a pullback to the downside here. And we did see the company increase their dividend by to $1.69 per share. This is the 31st consecutive annual increase. Now, if you're looking at the segment performance, software actually increased by 11.3% when you're looking at top line revenue, but once again, a deceleration, maybe some weakness within the Red Hat enterprise business in itself here. And they are expecting revenue growth for the fiscal year to be maintained at greater than 5% on a constant currency basis. For the commentary on the conference call, what was actually very interesting, Gen AI now represents around 30% of IBM's total backlog, and 80% of that Gen AI book of business is from net new clients. So that's actually some optimism for them in the long term here. But once again, seeing some deceleration when it comes to some of the key segments of their business, seeing a pullback to the downside. I think this is also on the back of ServiceNow. They also missed the street's expectations as well. That kind of pulled down a lot of the software names in the after hours trading session as well. So maybe not the best earnings, maybe not the best guidance, but also we are seeing kind of an industry pullback on the software front. That's also hurting this name this morning.
Okay, let's talk through what you're paying attention to for the flows for the S&P 500 today, to the upside and the downside.
Yeah, we continue to see call flows at that 7150 level. Got relatively close there yesterday. Let's see if we're going to be able to touch that level today. To the downside, looking at 7050 with a VIX implying around about a 1.2% move either to the upside or downside here. So this morning, Diane, it looks like it's more of a focus around semiconductors, especially the memory names, and then also industrials catching a bid as well. CSX reported earnings yesterday. It's up about 4.5% or so. You are seeing some industrial names moving to the upside on the back of that earnings announcement as well.